to inform the listeners this week, and I'm really sorry about it because I know everyone was excited, but our special guest this week will not be joining us. I had hyped it up, Isosceles Whitaker, the inventor of two-ply bacon. I was excited about it, to talk to him about his invention. And then I realised what two-ply bacon was just two bits of bacon that are half-cooked because they're back on back.
I mean, that's a little reductive, but there's a lot of inventions you could reductively boil down that way. Oh, two-ply toilet paper, that's just two bits of toilet paper stuck back to back.
That's what Isosceles said. Apparently, people do this all the time. They invite him on because they've heard about two-ply bacon, and if they're like me, I love a bit of bacon. I get very excited about bacon and bacon-based lifestyles. So I was like, two-ply bacon, like toilet paper, but for bacon, at last. And he went, yeah, two-ply is for bacon, at last. And then I tried some and realised that, nice and crispy on the outside, soft and salty on the inside. That's the problem. You see, the two-ply toilet paper, I get your point. That people can sniff at that, and certainly don't after you've used it. But my issue with two-ply tissue was the same at first, where I'm like, mate, there's two sides of this tissue paper not getting used, which is why I peel them apart. And then, by that point, it's so thin that I'm basically just wiping the ass with my fingers. But then I've got two clean sheets of tissue paper to wipe them with, and then don't bother washing your hands. You've already used the toilet paper. You're good to get on with the day. Back to my food prep job.
I was going to have a witty response to that, but you knocked it out of my brain.
Sorry, I knocked your witty response out with my shitty response.
And make sure to wipe your eyes.
Oh, absolutely. I have conjunctivitis 3 times within just the 2 eyes. So if you want to break my record, go with my invention, 1-ply, 2-ply toilet paper, because 1-ply 1 equals 2. That's the tagline of the company. We're really hurting for guests. Every week, I have been promising hot celebrities and associated celebrity goss. Sometimes even gossip, if it's good.
Have I not been informing you? I have been getting guests for every episode. They're just sitting quietly in the back of my office, politely unsure when it's their turn to speak. Should I have been, pressuring our guests to, speak up a bit and make it known they were here?
Well, yeah, to be honest, I do sometimes hear them in the background. There was 1 week, I swore I heard Chevy Chase saying, when's she gonna fucking get to us? What I do is, out of a sense of professional insecurity, I have Conrad wipe those with a noise gate. Because the idea that you're doing better than me professionally at getting the guests. So you've got big Hollywood celebs, and I can't even get a bacon guy.
If only I'd known. Last week I had in the office Clive Graveham, the inventor of 3-ply cheese.
You are What? He's fromage royalty. He's the big cheese.
There was just not a good opportunity to wedge him into the hour of the show, unfortunately.
Oh, what? Talk about a Swiss opportunity.
Oh, God.
Welcome to Podquisition.
I didn't even say it was a Gouda pun. I don't do the Gouda ones. I find Gouda-based cheese puns the domain of the damned. So I believe I deserve a...
Wensleydale, can we get to the podcast? This is terrible.
Okay.
Welcome to Podquisition. We talk about video games here from time to time, if we must.
I'm just sorry, Conrad, if you couldn't come and bear it, you should have said.
Oh. Who's played stuff this week? Who's done stuff with their hands and interactions?
I've only played the one, so if other people have more...
No, I've only... Well, no, I've played 2 things this week, actually.
Oh, well, I think it's a Conrad start then, because I've only
shit.
played the one this week.
All right. Well, I am currently playing a game called Dissent on Mars. And just to be clear, that is Dissent, as in dissatisfaction on Mars.
Well, of course it's spelt that way. You're playing it.
And this is a colony sim that is really, really interesting because its mechanics are based around setting terms for how your government functions, how private and public ownership of property functions, and how money works. And so you can build gay space communism with it.
Yeah, like you mentioned this before the show, and I looked it up, and the first screenshot I saw was someone setting productive property should be common ownership, but personal property would be private ownership. And I'm like, oh, this is granular in a way that I can see why Conrad would see this and go, yeah, I gotta click on this.
Yeah, and it is, oh god, granular. But you set these terms for your colony at the beginning, how you're gonna manage your government, whether it's autocratic or if it's going to be democratic. And once you've determined planning, you can then get into what kind of financial system you want to have. And you can have a market-based system entirely if you want. You can have things in common ownership. You can make it so that nobody can accumulate money. Like, the money loses value at the end of the term, and you begin earning money again to purchase your things. It's fascinating. But then when you get into the play, a lot of these colony sims, especially the indie ones, they're so fiddly and so granular. And this is making some efforts towards easing that. You can build buildings as they are with all of the components that you would need to make them function, instead of building them in, like by drawing out the shape of the building and then putting in the walls and then putting in the items. Like, you can have stock ones and they are all like reasonably sized and appropriate for a grid construction. But if you want to rotate something, you're just going to have to build the whole thing and move every object. And it is tedious. And it has a tutorial that I appreciate. Thank God it has a tutorial, because I have played games like this that have such a limited tutorial that they really don't tell you anything about the game when you start it. But this tutorial its step-by-step process has so many steps. And it does interestingly give you like freedom to browse around within the menus and the context, and always directs you back to the path of the tutorial in a very clear way, which I appreciate. But the UI has some weird quirks. Highlighting versus clicking something. If you click on something you have highlighted, it will go to a menu of items, but what you really wanted to do was just highlight the item, then go and select from a series of menus in the next box over in your window. It feels alien at the outset. And the thing is, I am certain that once I get a grip on this, and it starts to feel normal and natural, I'm going to have a really enjoyable time bringing these colonists in, letting them determine what jobs they want to do, and sort of working my society in such a way that everybody is happy. I'm gonna love that once I get past this initial hurdle of its fiddly UI and inputs and the way it manages space and resources. It looks like a great game. I have no way of knowing until I get past this point And that is frustrating. Other games of this nature, like Oxygen Not Included, where you're building a colony and the little guys do most of the work, but you can make assignments and get very specific. That one feels right away like you're accomplishing something. And in this, I feel like I have to stop and come up with a ton of like rearrangement and planning from where the tutorial started before anything actually progresses in the game. And that is, I'm determined. I'm determined to experience and enjoy this. But without that determination, I would bounce off of it right away. It is such a strong conceptual idea that I want to explore that I am gonna ride this out. But it is so hard to recommend right now. So that's where I'm at with it. It's complicated and fiddly and granular, and those are all things that you can really love in a game like this. It's such a great idea, and I really want to like it, and I hope I will. Right now, I just don't know what to think.
Yeah, it does sound a little high of a hurdle.
It's a lot.
To get into.
It's a lot. I don't know. There's a lot here, but you in the tutorial, the very first thing you do is make a factory that builds bathtubs. The second thing you do is make a factory that builds furniture. And the third thing you do, I think, is a game design studio. And you can make all kinds of games there. Like, when I'm saying granular, like, so your game studio can be made to make different types of games. You can, as part of your planning. And they can make adventure games, logic games, and the playing of the games improves the skills of your workers if they're that type of game. And then there are other games that are just fun and that just make people happy. And your individual colonists have all of these traits that they can have that are, pros and cons. And there's so many of them across different categories. Like, there's so much depth here to plumb that if I get the opportunity and have the patience to do so, I am sure I'm going to find fascinating to try and balance. Like, oh God, I want this to be good.
I hope for you get over that hurdle and it gets good.
Me too. What about you two? Who's up next?
You itching to chat about one, Steph?
Yeah. I can't stop playing it. I got that PlayStation Portal in my hand now because there's little bits to do. There's so much to do. There's so much to maintain. So I've been playing the new 2 Point game.
Oh, 2 Point Museum?
2 Point Museum.
Yes.
Now, I played 2 Point Hospital a few years ago. I talked about it, I believe, on Podquisition.
I believe so.
I liked it. I do like it. It is a good game, a good spiritual successor to Theme Hospital. I have some issues with it. Before I bit off on this, just to make sure that I wasn't going to spunk my money up a wall, I re-downloaded some 2 Point Hospital and was like, yep, this is charming and fun. Really fiddly in places. Some of the readability is really bad. The main problem I have with it is the problem I have with Theme Hospital, and that's I'm running a hospital. It's really stressful. People are dying, and I feel constantly under pressure. Plus, I'm part of the for-profit healthcare industry. And they said the Dungeon Keeper put you in the role of the baddie. Oh no. This one, though, is exactly perfect. This one is amazing. It's still got some issues. Some of that readability is still wonky, but it's much better than it was in 2 Point Hospital. A lot more intuitive, better laid out UI. Still very fiddly, still some bits where it's like, I should be able to get to this menu from this menu, why should I go through this one route instead of this? But they really have, like someone on social media said to me that they were unsure of this because it had looked like they were just plugging themes into the same old game and just exploiting it that way. And I said, like, you'd have to be really casually observing it, which, you know, that's not their fault, but it is impressive how much they've worked on these games. I didn't try Campus because thematically it did nothing for me. But having played 2 Point Hospital and going right onto this, my God, they work hard on these games. They really do want them to be as feature-rich and fun as possible. And there's so many little improvements, and it feels like the simple act of placing decorations in 2 Point Hospital was a little bit, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what is an efficient way of you doing all this. Then there's something about the way they've done 2 Point Museum where it just comes naturally to you. It's like, okay, well, I've got this space here. I've got room on the wall for a clock. Let's just bung that on. And there's a lot more instant feedback about what you're doing as you're building stuff. The big difference maker, of course, is it's a museum, not a hospital. As someone on Blue Sky pointed out, yeah, I'm not... Because I mentioned, like, I like 2 Point Museum because I'm not engaging in the fiscal violence of the for-profit healthcare system. And someone sharp as fuck fired back with, no, just the cultural violence of the artifact-seizing museum industry. Very well played on that person's part. But I loved museums as a kid, so I have a lot of fond memories for museums. And I still like going to some of them. Maybe not the British Museum, no. But when there's that one in Philadelphia, I took a date there once. The Museum of Medical Oddities that you told me about, Conrad?
The Mutter.
Oh yeah, they gave it a classy name, not what I just called it. The Mutter Museum. So I realised I'm being very scattershot with this. I'm very excited about this game because it is so fucking good.
Be excited. I'm enjoying the vibes.
So yeah, I really like museums. And it's so much lower stakes than a hospital, so it's immediately more chill. I still have to worry about things, you know, when the museum gets big enough, criminals turn up to rob or vandalize your stuff. And it's genuinely heartbreaking if they make off with an exhibit. However, one cute thing is sometimes they ransom it to you back. You get a letter from them, so you can buy the exhibit back at a markup. And of course, you know, you got to watch the money so that it doesn't run out and all of that. But it isn't this, like, there is a queue of 30 people with light bulbs for heads and they're going to die because of you. So I'm being able to play it at a pace that I'm more comfortable with. And what really sold me is there is something I love more than a museum, infinitely more, and that's an aquarium. And you can have aquarium exhibits. You can make a full, dedicated aquarium if you want. And that leads me to what really, really fucking impresses me about this. This could have been several games. This could have been exactly what that person on social media thought the series was. I'm playing this and I'm like, I don't even know if I can adequately describe how much this game is doing and how disparate the experience is. I started off, I've been going through the more campaigny side before doing a sandbox. So I'm doing like step by step, piecemeal learning how to run different exhibits, all of that. I start off with a prehistory, like a natural history museum, dinosaur bones, things in amber, all of that. And I'm running that for hours because I could have left. They were like, you've met the objective. Now it's time to move on. And I went, bitch, we move on when I say it's time to move on. I've got more bones coming. So I spent hours making this natural history museum. And that was enough for a game. And then I got to the aquarium stuff. And there's, you know, fundamentally, it's still the same management sim stuff. But now I am making fish tanks and putting in fish food and working out like the best mixture of fish to put in the tank. And then you've got the big fish that will eat the little fish, so you keep them like all of the little intricacies of dealing with fish. That could have been an expansion or a full game. If this were The Sims, that's exactly what it would be. If this was an EA game, something like that, absolutely, you would have 2 Point Museum, the Aquarium one. But here, it does feel like I've got 2 different games. Except I don't have 2 different games, because I'm on my 3rd style of exhibit right now, which is Supernatural, which now has me building poltergeist rooms, because it's a haunted hotel, and I can build rooms that have one-way viewing walls to stick ghosts in. And the ghosts have their own different needs, and they get bored every now and then and break out, and you need to send one of your museum experts in there to talk to them to calm them down. The nature of the ailments that your experts can get changes, because the way you get exhibits is cool as well. You send your staff off on expeditions, and as you fulfill objectives, you unlock new areas to go on expeditions to. So they go away, they come back after a while with an exhibit, and every location has like between 1 and 3, maybe 4 different exhibits, and you don't know what you get until it arrives. So even then, they've done the fucking loot box shit, except it's just the dopamine part of it, with a really good crate opening animation. And your experts, any staff member that goes can come back with injuries or diseases from where they've gone. And it's the same 2 Point Hospital approach of like visual puns and stuff. You send someone to a chilly area, they might come back with cold feet, so they just clomp about with their movement reduced because they've got ice blocks on their feet, and you've got to cure them. In the Supernatural Museum, they're coming back with curses. Half of my staff are frogs now. Big bipedal frogs that sort of wobble around like noodle people. That's quite fun. And I've still got the Science Museum. I've not touched that yet. I unlocked that last night, but I spent all of my spare time today just doing the haunted shit. And the exhibits are so fun. The exhibits are really fun, especially the haunted ones. There's a creepy doll as an exhibit, and no matter where you move the camera, her face is looking at you. She's just looking at the in-game camera, and she's the only thing that doesn't pause when you pause time. So you pause the game, and you're still moving the camera around with time frozen, and she's still moving her head to look at you. There is a mannequin that's just completely still. If you move the camera away from it and then move it back on, it's in a different pose. Lots of cute little things like that. There is a plant in the horticultural... Yeah, there's a horticultural one as well. You know, big Venus flytraps and stuff. There is a plant that swallows people and spits them out as clowns. And they stay as clowns forever. And as they walk around the museum, they raise the entertainment stat of all the other guests around them. So it's actually beneficial to fill your museum with clowns. There's a bat-shaped plant in the Supernatural one that embraces guests, and they come out as vampires. And then they generate more excitement looking at the other Supernatural exhibits. I can't get enough of it. It's got some issues. Sometimes the game will be perfectly okay with what you've built, or what it's built. If you're using a prefabbed museum, it'll run fine, and then suddenly something will happen and you won't know what it is that, well, now my staff can't go through that door. That was there pre-built as part of the museum I've taken over. Lately, I've been having an issue with my staff claiming they can't get to the expedition helicopter. And they go in the helicopter and they just sit in it. And it doesn't take off. And you have to destroy the helicopter. And you get your money back, so it's just a hassle of just destroy the helicopter, then plonk it back down. And that'll work again fine for a while. And then it'll happen again. And these are known issues. I've seen posts from the devs like a month ago being like, yeah, we're trying to work out why this is. And I understand a fair bit of it because half the time I spent in 2 Point Hospital, I had a museum twice the size of any hospital I'd built. It gets big. One building alone can become a massive sprawl if you're not careful. And it wasn't because I'm not careful. And every map will have the one building you start with and then other plots around it that'll have other buildings worth of space. So eventually, and I am looking forward to the sandbox, because then I'm going to be able to have multiple buildings, the same museum but with all of the themes in one, which you can do in any of them. If the Natural History Museum I made, I opened up a new building and made it an aquarium. I've made sure there are fish on every museum I've done because I fucking love aquariums. So yeah, I am so happy with this game. And this is one of those games, and I love it when they come along, that I don't just get to say I'm enjoying it. I get to say, this game is making me full on happy. When I'm playing this, I have a big smile on my face. I am making a cute museum, and all of the guests are happy, and all of the staff are happy, except that one guy, and I fired him. So, it's all good. That sounded like I was being autobiographical now that I said that out loud. That wasn't a reference to anything. But no, 2 Point Museum is so good. Yeah, anyone who liked 2 Point Hospital, especially if you're like me, who's like, I like the idea of management sims, but they can be very headache-inducing, and I've got the ADHD, and I've got that horrible combination of ADHD and OCD, to where I'm too impatient to make the museum as neat and tidy as I want, but I've got too much OCD to be ever pleased with what I've done.
Yeah.
But I'm fine with this one. There's something... And again, I think the fact it's a museum helps, because you can make partition walls and barricades and make everything in its neat little space, or you could just have a big open space free-for-all, and it's a museum. It doesn't matter. All of the exhibits are interactive in some way, so it's not like you ever feel you have to barricade something, because you will miss out on fun animations, like someone being dragged by a tentacle under a haunted bed. I'm not going to gate someone off from the fun of that. But yeah, this just makes me happy. I have been dangerously hooked. I am late on a project thing because I have been glued to this.
Ooh,
yeah,
wonderful.
I'm all about it. Love it.
Well, I've got a game I'm really eager to talk about this week that people have been recommending to me since, like, last year. And it's one of those that, like, no one told me anything about it, just a lot of people were very demanding I had to check it out. And as such, I went, yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. Too many people are telling me what to do. And I got to it, and now I'm going, yeah, I understand why every one of you told me I needed to play it. So it's called 1000X Resist, and it is a voice-acted... I'm not going to say visual novel, because you're walking around in 3D space and there is some light puzzle interaction and sort of 3D navigation, but it, in most cases, might as well be like a visual novel, in that it is a game largely about walking around, having conversations, and experiencing a world. It's very well voice-acted. The narrative is fucking fascinating, and is some of the best writing and performances I've seen in a game in years. I gotta work out where to start trying to explain this game. Initially, it is presented to you as this really interesting sci-fi setting, where you're dropped into this world where it's very casually mentioned that, like, you are living underground, the sky is a projection, and everyone you're speaking to, their names just seem to be, like, job titles within a society, and there is very clearly, like, very little is explained to you early on about this society, but you're picking up, through casual conversation, this is a matriarchal society with a big influence of this, like, religion about some figure called the All-Mother, who at some point might just call you to get on a train to go join her in the surface wars, and once you go, you're never allowed to come back or speak to anyone back home. And it has real vibes of, like, the way that religions like Scientology treat outsiders, and if someone leaves the religion, they are, like, it is a sin to have people on the outside and people within the belief communicate with each other. Really, really interesting dynamics being set up early on, and you are playing as this character called Watcher, and as the latest person in the society to be put in the job position of Watcher, your job is to essentially, you know how in, like, there's probably better examples, but the one that's jumping to mind is, like, the way that they tried to frame the Animus in the Assassin's Creed games. You're jumping into, like, memories of people from the past in a sort of VR sense. Your job as Watcher is to be, like, the one person in this society who has lived through the memories, both good and bad, of the once a human being who is now essentially God. And to be the one person who knows, by basically walking in the shoes of them, knows the very human aspects of the person that you treat as a god. And then you dig into starting to explore the past of this, like, person who's going to end up being called the All-Mother. And it is this really interesting exploration of... It's very clear this game was made, like, during the first spring and summer of COVID. Because while COVID is never mentioned, it is about a disease that is... has different symptoms and is not the same thing. It's very clearly a very direct story about being a Chinese American in the United States right when COVID was kicking off. It is an exploration of, when you are a member of a minority group who has been labelled the carriers of a disease, be it, people from Asia more broadly, but specifically China during the start of COVID, be it, people who were gay during the HIV and AIDS epidemic. An exploration of what it does to a person to be put in the position of, like, fingers being pointed at you and being told you're the reason this is spreading. And one of the things that I think's really interesting early on is for a game that is, like, this exploration of this character that's been built up in the early section as, like, as this sort of religious figure that you're gonna, people are going to go and fight in a war for. They do not shy away from exploring really interesting complexities of the ways that sometimes people in minority groups will sell people they should be allying down the river for their own safety and temporary protection. You see this in the real world in things like the way that certain trans people will go, oh, well, I'm one of the good ones that X, Y, and Z, not one of the bad trans people X, Y, and Z, hoping that right-wing Republicans will come for them last.
Fucking Quizlings.
Right, you see it in, like, cishet gays that are, again, like, oh, yeah, they're taking all the trans people's rights, but you'll stop when you get to us, right? And in this, the first exploration of that is exploring the experiences of this character who's end up going to become essentially an immortal being, when she is still, like, a very normal human person, basically being willing to sell her friend down the river by going, at least from what I can see so far, it seems to be like, well, I'm Chinese, sure, but I grew up in America. I've never been to China. I don't eat any of those weird Chinese foods. I speak perfect English. That one over there, she sometimes goes home to China and she eats some of those weird foods, and her English is like 95% perfect, but occasionally she'll not have a word to hand and she'll say the Chinese word. Be scared of her as the ones, like, she's one of the bad, scary ones that spread the disease, not me. I'm like one of you lot. And I am honestly surprised and impressed at how willing this game was to, from the start, put you in the shoes of someone being a little selfishly self-preservationist, and not trying to overly sympathize that position, but to do a lot to give you insight into the internal experience of that decision. The game does some really interesting stuff with dialogue choices, and specifically, because you are living through the memories of a person rather than being that person, sometimes doing the right thing will just not be an option. It is not within the scope of what that person could or would have done at that time. And that's used to really interesting effect sometimes. It also plays around very interestingly with incomplete information, because you are being dropped into a slice of a person's life with only the context of what you experience in the moment. You have to piece together the context, any context prior to that moment, you have to pick up by just looking around, investigating things, having conversations, putting as much of that together as you can. Gameplay-wise, as I said, it's largely walking around in third-person environments, looking for interaction points and conversations. There's occasionally some bits that are... If either of you ever played or saw the PS Vita game, or PSP game, Gravity Rush...
Oh, yeah,
There's occasionally some light Gravity Rush-esque mechanics where you're, like, floating through these abstract environments, essentially by tethering to floating points in the air and sort of changing the gravity so you rush toward them. It's an excuse for interesting traversal, at least early on, rather than a puzzle mechanic. I'm curious if it's going to get used for more puzzly purposes as it goes. But yeah, narratively, I am fucking hooked by this game. Its explorations of things like being an autistic person and not being able to see in the moment that someone's sort of taking advantage of your need for friendship, or its explorations of how one person's generational trauma, when used as the basis for a religion, would have impacts on that religion's followers. I'm maybe like 3 hours into what I hear is like a 12-hour game, and the further I've gotten into it, the more I have been gripped by it. Toward the end of my play session the other day, without getting too spoilery, something pretty bad was happening. And, like, this message was coming over the tannoys being like, oh, and here we have a depiction direct from the All-Mother of the events that transpired. And they made some wild fucking choices about the artistic design of how to communicate some very serious events in ways that opened up so many questions for me I don't know what to make of. I am deeply fascinated by 1000X Resist. As I say, it's all voice acted, which I think I would have struggled to play this if it hadn't been voice acted. The voice acting is really good. It's really helped me to be focused on it well. I really want to recommend it. I am itching to sit down and play more of it, and the only reason I'm not playing it now is I don't want to miss out on the voice acting.
It sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the premise, when you mentioned, like, the whole, like, quisling, leopard face-eating shit, that is something I really would love to see explored more in games, and just in media in general.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest problems, like, we certainly have in queer communities, is that kind of stuff, because it's so divisive and unhelpful, and seeing that discussed more sounds good.
There is a chapter of the game that I have seen explicitly called, what's the term? Model minority. Like, a lot of it is so much about, like, there's a lot of exploration of that whole idea of everything you do is a reflection of the minority group you are a part of, and, like, the stuff that applies. Like, I'm maybe a quarter of the way in. It's playing around in such interesting space, and I'm deeply curious where it's going.
And that's 1000X Resist?
Yep, 1000X Resist.
Right.
1000, the letter X, the word resist, no spaces, it's all just one thing. So yeah, highly recommend it. It's well worth checking out.
Nice.
What about you, Conrad? What's the other thing you've played this week?
Well, the other thing I played this week is a demo of a game called AM, which is like the radio band AM. You are in a car driving down dark rural roads and listening to the radio, and the radio is playing like an evangelical radio program that is talking about the rapture and the end times. And apparently you have accepted Jesus into your heart, and he's all over your flashlight that you have. You're behind the wheel of the car for the entirety of it. It uses WASD to control the car, which is a miserable experience on a refined driving game. This is less refined, I would say, but also it is deliberate. I don't think this would play well with a controller. Like, you could definitely make it work with a controller, but part of why the game is so effective is the kind of awkwardness with which the controls function, which are then just heightened in a panic mode. So your control of the vehicle is all done with WASD, as I said, but all other interactions are done using the mouse. You can look closer at certain parts of the car, such as the radio, the rear view mirror. You can interact with windshield wipers and headlight buttons. You can also, at the edges of the screen, turn your gaze to one of 4 cardinal directions. Facing forward is normal, your driver's side window, passenger side window, rear window. And in these views, there are some other interactions you can do. On the side views, you can roll those windows down and up, but it's pretty limited interaction. So the goal of the game is to drive through the night. Control of the vehicle is very bad. It's overcorrections, lots of that happening. And as you're driving, you'll be presented with multiple paths. Some of them will end in dead ends, and you'll have to backtrack a little bit. And it's really just to give the sense of unease. I have my suspicions about how the game is generating the road, and whether dead ends are avoidable or not, and whether it's possible to ever be on the wrong track. But it does it effectively. It makes you feel uncomfortable and concerned for your well-being, particularly once enemy interactions are introduced. And there seem to be 2 types of enemies present in the demo. The first one that I encountered comes at the vehicle, and this is where the head rotation thing comes into effect, because they're moving around the vehicle and you are in a panic, trying to rotate your gaze around the car to see where they have moved to. Your flashlight has the ability to be charged up, and when it's fully charged up, it releases a beam that you can fire at the horrifying demon lady that's crawling around your car. It's tense, and it definitely makes you feel threatened and nervous for when you're next going to encounter one. It usually takes 2-3 hits to send them on their way. The other enemy type, you just start hearing breathing, and the radio starts to get bad, and then slowly it starts to whisper to you. And so you can't always tell with the music and everything going on whether or not that breathing's there, but it does slowly build up, and it becomes obvious that something else is in the car with you. And then it's, all right, I gotta look around and find this thing before it devours me. It's really interesting what they're doing in this demo. And it does create tension and awkwardness and discomfort as you're waiting for something to happen, and then really heightens as you're flailing around a bit when you have an encounter. And the appearance of these creatures is startling, and the designs are, they're pretty cool. But having played the demo, it leaves me wondering what more they could be doing with it because of the limitations of the vehicle and your movement and the things you can interact with. It introduces partway through the demo that you can have your car's windows covered up by some kind of black viscous fluid. And so you can remove it from the surfaces by interacting, windshield wipers, winding down windows, that sort of thing. But past that, I really don't know what they're going to do in a full game or what they would do. And the demo ends in a weird, like, sort of spot, and then continues for a long time after with just a bunch of further driving and weirdness, and then reaches a point where I think I'm just driving up and down the same road with no possible exit. And I don't know what the fuck's going on. But they have definitely made me interested in whatever the full game is going to be. Yeah, it's weird. And ugly. And not fun to drive. And there is a bit of satisfaction to be gained from getting this very sensitive vehicle to fly right? You know? To, like, that you've gotten the hang of the driving, and then having that interrupted by a action sequence, and now you're rushing to switch your mode of thinking in terms of controls. There's something really juicy there. I really wonder what else they're going to do, and I'm looking forward to seeing a finished product if such a thing actually exists, which I question too, based on the title screen after I've completed the demo. It is a fascinating thing that is free and worth a demo, and you can get a good hour out of, and has made me curious about what else they might do. AM. I would check that demo out. It's on itch.
Neat. Is that everything we've played this week?
I think so.
Yeah. I did have one quick follow-up thing about Atomfall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did speak with you, Laura, about it a little bit earlier in the week.
Yeah.
I'm currently drafting my review of it, and I've had to reckon with the fact that, and I wasn't sure about it until the day after we recorded Podquisition, it hadn't properly kicked in. Well, I'd already had some headaches the day we recorded the last Podquisition, so I'd written it off as that. However, every subsequent time I have played Atomfall, I have been in pain. I like that game. Reviewing it is interesting, because how can you be like, how exactly does one approach? This is a good game. However, it causes me physical pain. It literally hurt me. We were talking about this a little bit with that other game a while back, the Metal Bringer. But this one, there's no ambiguity. I am fine. I play the game. Within minutes, both of my eyes are aching with a sort of not quite migraine, but a pre-migraine stab. I stop playing. The symptoms go away within minutes. It is every time. And I checked online. I posted about it on Blue Sky, and several other people reported the same thing. So I know it's not just me. Curiously, this game has a bizarre fisheye effect that I believe is the cause of it. It's almost imperceptible until you notice it. And I didn't notice it until I was looking up and down in a dialogue exchange, which fixes you in place. Fixes you in place with a focus on a person and a slightly closer view of the surroundings, so you have a really good vantage point to see what's happening. And I realised, as I looked up and down, there was something off, something ever so slightly disorienting and wrong. The best way I've described it is, it's as if the player character has eye stalks. And the eyes are bulging out and swiveling on an axis with an arc to look up and down, rather than any other game where you tilt and it's just up and down. And it gives this really subtle curvature at the top and the bottom of the screen. And what really gave it away was I was like, as I'm scrolling up, I'm realizing I can see more behind this beam of wood than I could before. I'm like, that's not how human vision works. I can't lift my eyes up and down to see more of what's behind a thing. But you can if you've got eye stalks and they're swiveling like a door. And of course, one of the biggest issues with this game is the lack of options when it comes to graphics, video, visuals, display, all of it. You can turn up the FOV, and people noticed that any subtlety with that fisheye goes out the window. It becomes full-bore fisheye. The FOV is set at 60, which is not ideal for a lot of people. Like, I normally, I think, end up, going at 100, which I think is fairly standard. But any higher than 60 and it starts to look wrong. And as you go higher, it gets more and more warped. And I was talking to Laura about this because obviously, Laura does a lot of work with accessibility coverage, accessibility advocacy, and, hosts Accessibility, a video series that y'all should check out if you haven't. And I asked Laura because I know you cover not just the expected stuff, but elements of accessibility people don't otherwise think about. Because I was curious if you'd done much on headaches, migraines, that sort of thing. You've done some migraine coverage.
Yeah, the problem with migraine coverage is that it's one of the ones where there is not great documentation on widely agreed causes or triggers. And because of the wild variance in migraine triggers that exist, it's not like something like, say, motion sickness. You can generally go, we understand that what's setting it off is a mismatch between what your ears are feeling and what your eyes are seeing. We know that turning off unnecessary head bob, increasing field of view, center screen reticles can help with it. Migraines, there's some places of overlap and some common things, but a lot of the time, games that are causing people to have migraines aren't apparent until a game releases and suddenly people are having migraines from it. And it is a case of, okay, what is this game doing that others aren't that is causing it in this case?
Yeah. And I totally understand that. Because, as a long-term migraine sufferer, I only just recently realized that some of my migraines are caused by my neck. I look so much at the photosensitivity side of it. I know stress is a big trigger for me as well, but it didn't click with me until something happened that strained my neck, and then I got a migraine. And then Fee was looking up physio exercises for it, and I've actually reduced the migraines a little bit and lessened how bad some of them could be by, massaging the hinges of my jaw and stuff like that.
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation with someone who, a while back, who realized that a big video game migraine trigger for them was small, thin text. Because all that was really happening was they were straining their eyes more to see that text, like the kind of text that's designed for you clearly designed your game for PC first and not for looking at it on console
That's
from across the
room.
room.
One of my little criticisms with 2 Point Museum. Yeah, I squint a lot.
Yeah, and for them, that little bit of extra eye strain was enough that it was becoming a migraine trigger.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting digging into trying to nail down what are common causes in that realm.
And I think for me, where I'm coming from with it is, no, you cannot anticipate every single trigger there is. However, there are common ones that an interest in migraine and headache sensitivity accessibility would help developers understand. I think right now what we have is, and I don't think it's through malice, I think it's through ignorance. I think like most accessibility issues, if someone doesn't have a particular disability, they tend not to think about it. And I get that. Yeah. Why would they? Despite being disabled myself in many different ways, there are still elements I don't consider when they pertain to disabilities I don't have. It's a very natural thing. But it does strike me as weird that in all these years, and still to this day, something like video games, the home of photosensitivity warnings, hasn't actually done much to consider that.
What I will say is, once you start digging into accessibility as a space, you would be surprised how many common disabilities and conditions are not yet accounted for.
I can believe that.
Like, the number of things that are being accounted for regularly versus not, it's a drop in the bucket still.
Yeah.
Hence how I can be 5 years into doing weekly digging into the one topic.
Yeah, and no, yeah, like, you know, there are so many disabilities, and as I say, even really common ones, if someone doesn't have it, they don't think about it. Why would they? And like, I don't say that to criticize them. Like, I literally mean, why would they? There's a lot of things I don't think about because they're not a function in my life any which way. You know, I don't... That was a bad... I was about to say I don't think about terrapins because I don't have a pet terrapin. I do actually think about terrapins quite a lot. But you know what I mean. And it's just, you'd think, and obviously we know that people don't think like this, but you would want to think that headaches would be an obvious one for video games. And I think we need, while there's been this push for accessibility, because Atomfall has a decent accessibility menu. There are good options in there, but the complete lack of even standard graphical options just goes to show, like, how if it's not something that's popular enough for devs to think about, they ain't thinking about it.
I would say you have already done, I think, the most helpful thing you could do for a developer in terms of, like, trying to progress getting the features you want seen to be things in future games, which is you have gone, I've identified I'm having a problem, I've sat with it long enough to go, it is definitely the game that is the constant when the problem is flaring up. You have played enough of it to identify the thing the game is doing that is being the trigger, and I am very much of the belief that is a very fair thing to talk about in a review, and to say, look, I recognise that this is my unique body having a response to the game, and that this is maybe something the developer could not have anticipated. However, I think it is fair to account this into my criticism of the game, because I've talked about this before on the show. There is only once in a decade plus of doing this as a full-time job that I've ever had to stop playing a game and review it incomplete. And it was a VR game for the original PlayStation VR, that I was reviewing for Polygon back in the day, and I had to stop playing because, like, the motion sickness was just debilitating while playing, and I was like, that was the thing, was I was at least able to go, I can talk about the things this game uniquely did that were the problems, so that there is something for the developer to learn from and go, these choices you made did have an impact and can, you know, in future consider working around them. At that point, you are basically doing an accessibility review. You're there.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to note, is what you said there about this game is doing something different. And that's where I'm inclined with some of them to be a bit less kind and a little less sort of, well, they couldn't have anticipated. Because I've not torn into Rebellion for it. In the review. It is an even-handed review because I want to just talk about how much I've enjoyed it. I can't do that, unfortunately. But I will let any dev off the hook for not thinking about a disability they don't have. I understand that is a human thing. How you react when you start thinking about it, that's a different matter. But the ignorance is not malicious inherently, so that's fine. The uncommon restriction of graphical options, mixed with the what the fuck are they doing of an in-game camera, that's where I'm like, okay, with or without the headaches, you shouldn't have done that because it's, if nothing else, bizarre. It is almost random that you would decide to do that. I have done this job for a long time. Too long. and I've been playing games longer than that. And I can't remember the last time I saw a game with hinged eyeballs. I think I have seen one or two, like, a long time ago, but not in a while. And it hurt my eyes.
I don't disagree with you. What I will say is sometimes not having certain settings or having a strange approach to doing something is a result of, things like the engine the game was built for wasn't designed to be this genre of game, or some weird issue came up, or trying to get the port to work on consoles, there were limitations in what would run well. Like, I don't think that these choices are made for no reason. Like, I guess my point is mainly just, I can see how you get into a position where you're like, oh, this is not how it's normally done, but it's fine. Because you're explicitly doing something that is not how it's normally done, not having a reference point for why doing it differently will create unanticipated issues. If you do something differently to how it's normally done and everyone on the team goes, yeah, this seems fine, without a reference point for doing it this way causes this issue,
Yeah. Oh, no, I totally understand that. I think what makes this one easier for me to sort of feel like I really should mention in the review, which I would do anyway.
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't disagree. I very much think you should mention it in the review.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying, because I know, like, you literally said I should, and what I'm trying to say is just explain why I'm less conflicted about this than I would be on some others. Even though I think every single game that gives me a headache, I absolutely should mention it. But I've had varying degrees of reluctance to do it. And I'm less reluctant with this one just from the perspective of, even if it didn't give me a headache, it's not good. And that's a shame that they've done this new thing other games don't do. And it's had a net negative reason. So it's kind of a shame on two fronts rather than just the incidental headache one.
Yeah, I think the point where we're sort of meeting in the middle here is, I definitely think you are right to bring it up in the review. It's less that that's where I'm coming from, and more whether I would approach being critical of those things from a position of anger or not. I think is what comes down to, could this have been anticipated? Was this there is well-documented evidence in the industry that doing it this way will be bad for disabled people, and you did it that way, and I can be annoyed that you did it that way, as opposed to, I am disappointed that the game is like this and that it's causing these issues, and being critical, but from a place of, I don't feel like you were malicious or lacking in doing your due diligence got us here.
Yeah.
And, I feel like that's the thing. It's just, for me, it's the, how annoyed am I that you ended up here?
Yeah. And I feel like I've misstepped in that I think I've sounded like I'm disagreeing with you when I'm actually 100% in agreement with you on all of this. And anything I'm saying is not a yeah, but, it's a yeah, and.
Fair.
Because it's like, yeah, completely agree with you. And also, what a weird fucking thing to do.
What a weird fucking thing to do, yes.
And I'm not angry in this case. There are some that I'm looking at, and I feel like I could be angry when it's like, when they've layered a game in like so many visual effects that it was bound to fucking trigger someone's sensitivity to something. Certainly that Metal Bringer, which I haven't gone back to test it properly, but even if it doesn't cause me any real pain, there's no photosensitivity warnings on that game whatsoever. And it is one of the most overly, aggressively, visually filtered, clashing, garish games I've ever seen. That game is liable to give someone a seizure. And there's no warnings when you start the game. That's not excusable. With Rebellion, with Atomfall, it's more that I'm disappointed that it is the case. I'm disappointed with the situation. I am baffled as to why they made the game weird and fisheye, and to the point where you can't bump up the FOV. There are some questionable things in it. And I just think ultimately what we need to do when it comes to game dev and accessibility in this area is we just need devs to think about it. And you're absolutely on the money when you say that it starts with us bringing it up like we are now.
Yeah.
Because even though with migraines there are so many different triggers and we're never going to work out the one ultimate truth to dealing with a migraine, there are many common exacerbators. There are some things games could do to have a bit more of a standardization to avoid some of the common ones. And it's just a case of doing that research. That's where we should be going with it. I think we're at a point where no one wants people to be hurt when playing their games. That's where we're at. And I think that's something just as a general rule, game dev needs to think about more. We look at accessibility a lot from the point of restriction and opening up those restrictions. We don't look at games accessibility in terms of protection as much. And that's an attitude I'd like to evolve. I'd like to be like, yeah, we want to open up games for disabled people to interact with them in new ways. But what about the other way round? The people who can interact with the game and then have to stop because of something else that's happened. So, yeah, I think opening restrictions and also looking at protections is a direction I'd like to see accessibility move in. I was only going to do a little PSA. I do apologise for us getting into a big long... No, actually, I don't, because I think that was a good discussion. But yeah, so just be careful if you're playing Atomfall, basically. Get an iron just to flatten your own TV out. It might help, I don't know. I don't know enough about physics.
Right, then in that case, we got one story this week. Normally I'd go, we fuck it on the news, but this is it's one of those stories that it feels important to bring up this week. So, the BDS Boycott non-profit organization has since October of 2023 been doing a lot of work with basically trying to help guide a sensible direction for consumer boycotts for people who want to stand in solidarity with Palestine and not financially support companies that are in physical, tangible, practical ways helping the Israeli Defense Force with their, attacks on Gaza. And there is a reason that this is relevant to video games this week. Late last week, the BDS organization basically put out a press release saying, we are making Microsoft going forward a priority target for boycott, and that includes Xbox as a brand. And there's a lot of reasons as to why. I'm going to try and summarize a very lengthy investigative article and set of causes as quickly as I can here. Back in January of 2025, there was a joint investigation by The Guardian, the Associated Press, plus 972 magazine, and other organizations that basically found that since October of 2023, Microsoft has been expanding dramatically its working alongside the IDF, specifically in terms of cloud processing capacity and AI technology, which have been used for things such as AI identification of military targets when Israel has been selecting places to bomb in Gaza. A lot of stuff in that article basically goes into depth on the ways that Microsoft's technology is being used by the IDF in their attacks on Gaza, and the money that Microsoft is knowingly making from that arrangement. Additionally, part of this is that a couple of Microsoft employees in late 2024 attempted to hold a peaceful vigil for the people who had died in Gaza, and were fired by Microsoft. And this all sort of came together with BDS deciding to make Microsoft a priority target for consumer boycott. Now, why specifically does that include video games? The short version is, for many people today, not using Windows on a PC, not using Microsoft Teams, not using Microsoft Office products is a little impractical, because a lot of people will end up having to use those in their workplace and don't really have the position to request or demand their workplace switch to alternatives, or the ability to install in alternatives on their work machines of their own accord. But, as they argue, Xbox gaming products are a place where most consumers have alternative options and a lot more freedom of ability to engage in a boycott financially in a way that would be felt by Microsoft, that is not so tied to restrictions that would keep you using those products in things like work. They talk about wanting to encourage the boycotting of Xbox, specifically Bethesda and Activision Blizzard King products. They talk about requesting that people cancel Game Pass subscriptions. Basically, where possible, where options exist, not play Xbox first-party games, not purchase games on Xbox where they have alternatives, etc., etc. I have a video going up on this later this week where I go into some depth on this. Short version, can't speak for anyone else on the show, but my approach is that I am planning to, as best I can, respect this boycott going forward. Much like my navigation of not supporting Ubisoft's games, there are going to be examples that come up where something relevant to accessibility happens with Xbox where it is hard for me to not talk about it as someone where accessibility is my job, and I will do my best to navigate that by contextualizing, by reminding people of this boycott and talking about the reasons for it as context, and not talking about those things outside of the accessibility story that is relevant. It's not a perfect solution, I know, but it is, doing my best to balance supporting this boycott with the job that is my job. But, yeah, I thought it was important to acknowledge this boycott. I think there are, it is worth going into, and if nothing else, reading the article that is sort of the basis for this boycott, and being aware of the stuff in there so that you can make a choice about that yourself.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I think you've pretty much summed it up. If you can support the boycott, then I would urge you to support the boycott. That's it.
Yeah, there's not much else I could say. I'm glad that I did that justice in a bit of a monologue there. It's just one of those, I didn't want... I've had some people asking me this week, why have I not covered X, Y, or Z game? And it feels like the best place is the place where people listen, is to be like, hey, there's a boycott going on, I'm doing my best to engage with it. So, yeah, I think that is everything for this week.
Yeah, I do believe so. Yeah, we had quite a meaty video there.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, but we were talking about accessibility. But
that we were.
People can no longer access the past to enjoy this for the first time all over again. They're going to have to access something else, Laura. And you have plenty of things that people could get access to enjoy.
Yeah, I do have a reasonably high number of things. They can find those at Laura K. Buzz pretty much everywhere. That's where I would recommend finding them. Laura K. Buzz on Patreon, that's the one that pays the bills. Blue Sky, YouTube, Twitch, whatever. You'll find all the stuff. Things I've got coming up. Next week, I will have hands-on impressions with the Switch 2. Getting a little bit of hands-on time with that at the weekend, so expect some stuff out of that. I will be at GA-Conf, the Game Accessibility Conference in London next week. I will be recording a live episode of Control Alt Access with Arevia, who will also be at GA-Conf. So we will be doing a big deep dive into doing our best to summarize 2 days worth of talks into a nice condensed little video to give people a sense of what stuff happened there and which talks are worth, checking out on their YouTube afterwards if you don't want to dig through 16 hours of talks. So look forward to those next week. What about you, Conrad? Where are you out on the internet?
Oh, I'm at Conrad Zimmerman on Blue Sky, and you can hang out with me on Twitch at twitch.tv/thatconradzimmerman. I'm on 3 days a week, Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays usually. You can buy anti-capitalist propaganda and Jimquisition merchandise at mercenarycreative.com, and everything I do online gets supported through Patreon at patreon.com/fistshark. And you know who else has a Patreon? Stephanie Sterling.
That is correct. Patreon.com/Jimquisition, which supports this podcast and the web series and the reviews on thejimquisition.com. I am hoping to have an Atomfall review up this week. It should have been up earlier in the week, but apologies that I don't get stuff out super quick. I got so much going on. Speaking of which, well, literally speaking of which, June 24th, Quantum Witch comes out. That is a game I have worked on. This will be my first publicly available bit of narrative work in games, as in full-on storytelling work. I've contributed fairly heavily to Quantum Witch, doing a sort of fairly sizable plot arc in it. There is a demo on Steam. There is a wish list. Do check out Quantum Witch. Date Everything should also be out sometime that month. That being the dating sim that exploded all over social media. I'm also a writer on that. And of course, Vampire Survivors. Lots of excited stuff with that game already, already available, and there's all sorts of stuff happening in future as well. And I am a very lucky girl, and I still got a good working relationship with them, so I am still doing stuff. And that's that. Thank you all so much for listening. Also Commander Sterling on Blue Sky and Twitch TV/Jim Sterling. That's it. Thank you everyone for being with us, for supporting us, listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.